My name is Mike, and for a long time, I thought my life was picture perfect. I married my college sweetheart, Anna, and together, we built what I believed was a strong, unshakable partnership. We had the kind of relationship that friends envied. You know, the kind where you can finish each other's sentences and know what the other person is thinking with just a glance. At least, that's what I thought. I work as an IT consultant, spending long hours on projects, and Anna, a graphic designer, worked from home. Our schedules didn't always align, but we made it work, or so I believed. I would wake up early, kiss her on the forehead before heading out, and come home to her waiting with dinner or a smile. Every little moment felt like a thread in the fabric of our happy life. But looking back now, I realized there were signs. They weren't glaring or obvious, but they were there. Little things, like how Anna started spending more time on her phone, always smiling at the screen but locking it as soon as I walked in, or how she would get dressed up even when she wasn't going anywhere. When I asked her about it, she'd brush it off. "Oh, I'm just keeping up with friends," she'd say. I didn't press her. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been through so much together. I remember one night in particular. We were having dinner, and I was telling her about a frustrating day at work. She was nodding, smiling in all the right places, but her eyes were somewhere else. I asked her if something was wrong, and she hesitated for just a second too long before saying, "No, everything's fine." That hesitation stuck with me. I didn't say anything, though. I told myself I was imagining things. Paranoia wasn't going to help anyone, right? Then there were the late-night design projects. She started telling me she needed more quiet time to focus, that she had deadlines to meet. I'd hear her laugh softly in the other room while I was half asleep on the couch. Again, I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband who questions everything. But a part of me started to feel disconnected. One weekend, Anna suggested we take a break from each other to reignite our spark. She said we'd been caught up in the daily grind and needed some space to reconnect. It sounded logical. I agreed, thinking it would do us both some good. I spent that weekend hiking, trying to clear my head. When I came back, Anna was waiting at the door, smiling brighter than I'd seen in months. She threw her arms around me and told me how much she'd missed me. For a moment, everything felt right again. But not for long. Not long at all. Before we continue, a quick reminder. 80% of our viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying this story, please support our channel by hitting the subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss an upload. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It started with little things I could have easily ignored if I weren't already feeling that sense of distance. Anna began taking more calls in private. Her laughter, the kind that used to light up our home, now echoed from behind closed doors. Whenever I asked who she was talking to, she'd wave it off with a smile. "Just a friend," she'd say. I wanted to believe her. I really did. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. Anna didn't hear me come in. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as I walked toward the living room. "I can't wait to see you again," she said, her tone warm in a way that wasn't meant for me. My stomach turned. I froze in place, not sure if I should confront her or let it go. I told myself I was being irrational. Maybe it really was just a friend. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. Things escalated a few weeks later. Anna mentioned she was going out with friends from her design group. I didn't think much of it until I noticed she was unusually excited. Spending extra time on her hair, wearing perfume she hadn't touched in months. She looked stunning, and for the first time in years, I felt invisible. I tried to push the thought away, but as the hours passed and Anna still hadn't come home, doubt crept in. Midnight came and went. I called her phone, and it went straight to voicemail. I sat there on the couch, staring at the clock, feeling like a stranger in my own home. When she finally walked through the door, it was nearly 2 a.m. Her hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a hint of guilt in her eyes, though she tried to mask it with a smile. "How was your night?" I asked, my voice more strained than I'd intended. "Oh, it was fun," she replied, breezing past me toward the bedroom. "Just drinks and catching up." She didn't offer any details, and I didn't ask for more. I told myself I didn't want to come across as controlling, but the truth was, I was scared of what her answers might reveal. The turning point came on a Saturday. Anna said she had a work-related meeting in the city. Something didn't sit right with me, and for the first time, I decided to follow her. I felt ridiculous, like some cliché private investigator in a bad movie. But I needed to know. I drove a safe distance behind her, my heart pounding the entire time. She didn't go to the office. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe. I watched as she got out of the car, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in the window. Moments later, a man walked up to her, a tall, confident guy with an easy smile. She greeted him with a hug that lingered too long, the kind of hug she hadn't given me in months. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. The way they leaned toward each other, the way she laughed at everything he said, it was all I needed to see. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I wanted to storm out of the car, confront them, demand answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching as the woman I loved slipped further and further away from me. When she got home that night, I asked her how her meeting went. She smiled and said, "Productive." That word cut deeper than anything else she could have said. I realized then that I wasn't just losing her. I'd already lost her. She was lying to my face, and she didn't even flinch. The following week, I found the courage to look through her phone. I'd never done anything like that before, but desperation makes you do things you'd never imagine. What I found shattered me. Texts between her and the man I'd seen at the cafe, Mark. They weren't just friendly messages. They were explicit, filled with inside jokes, plans for future meetups, and memories they were building together while I sat at home. One message stood out. "I can't wait until we're together without sneaking around. He'll never know." That sentence played over and over in my head, like a cruel mantra. I felt like a fool, a blind, trusting fool who had let this happen right under his nose. I confronted her the next morning. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just showed her the messages. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then she sighed and sat down at the kitchen table, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't plan this, Mike. It just happened." I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand how she could do this to me, to us. But instead, I just stood there, numb. "How long?" I finally asked. "A few months," she admitted. "Since the summer." Months. While I was working late to provide for us, while I was planning our future, she was building a new one with someone else. I couldn't process it. My mind was spinning, my heart was breaking, and all I could think about was how we'd ended up here. "I need time to think," I said, my voice cold and distant, even to my own ears. I walked out of the house, leaving Anna alone at the table. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my life had just come crashing down. I drove aimlessly for hours that morning. No music, no destination, just the sound of the engine and my thoughts, if you could call them that. It was more like static, a chaotic swirl of emotions that I couldn't even begin to sort out. How did we get here? How could she do this to me? And, most painfully of all, what did I do wrong? I pulled into an empty parking lot near the outskirts of town. I sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the horizon. My mind replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for clues I might have missed. Was it something I said? Something I didn't do? No matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the truth remained the same. She had chosen someone else. She had betrayed me. Hours later, I returned home. The house felt different, cold, unfamiliar. Anna was sitting on the couch, her phone on the table, untouched. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes puffy and red. "Mike," she began, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to continue. She shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't have an excuse for what I did. But I need you to understand. I didn't plan this. Mark, he made me feel." "Feel what?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "What did he make you feel that I didn't? Loved? Wanted? Special?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. I turned away, pacing the room, trying to keep my composure. Do you even want to fix this? I asked after a long pause. Or is this just you easing your guilt before you walk away? I don't want to leave, she said quickly, standing up. I want us to work through this. I know it won't be easy, but I want to try. I laughed bitterly. You want us to work through this? You? The one who tore it apart in the first place. You want me to just forget what you've done and pretend everything's fine? No, she whispered. I don't expect you to forget. I don't want to lose you. Her words hung in the air, but they felt hollow, like an echo of a promise already broken. I couldn't even look at her. Every time I did, all I could see was her with him. I shook my head and walked out of the room. The next few days were a blur. I barely spoke to Anna, and when I did, it was only about the most basic necessities. I went to work, came home, and avoided her at all costs. She tried to bridge the gap, cooking meals, leaving notes, even trying to initiate conversations. But I wasn't ready. I couldn't just move on like nothing had happened. Then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. It was a Thursday evening. I was in the garage, working on an old project car I'd been restoring. Anna came in, holding something in her hands. It was a small, square envelope. What's this? I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. She hesitated before handing it to me. I thought you should know, she said quietly. I opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, a copy of a positive pregnancy test. My heart stopped. I looked up at her, my mind racing. Are you? Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at the test, trying to process what this meant. Is it mine? The question felt like a betrayal even as I said it, but I had to know. Her silence answered the question for me. It's his, isn't it? I asked, my voice cold and steady. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But I want us to raise it together, she said, her voice breaking. I want to rebuild what we had, Mike. Please. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity, the sheer lack of awareness. It was too much. I dropped the test on the table and walked out, slamming the door behind me. My mind was spinning again, but this time, it wasn't just pain I felt. It was anger. Burning, blinding anger. I spent the night at a hotel, unable to face her or the reality of what had just happened. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her and Mark, laughing, holding hands, creating a life while destroying mine. By morning, I knew what I had to do. When I got home, Anna was waiting for me in the living room. She looked like she hadn't slept either. I can't do this, I said before she could speak. I can't be a part of this charade. You made your choices, Anna. You made your bed. Now lie in it. Her face crumpled, but I didn't stay to watch her cry. I grabbed a bag and started packing. She followed me, pleading, apologizing, promising to make things right. But it was too late. I couldn't see a future for us anymore. As I walked out the door, she grabbed my arm. Please, Mike, she begged. Don't leave. We can figure this out. I looked at her one last time, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we'd lost. I can't, I said, pulling my arm free. And with that, I left, not knowing where I was going but certain I couldn't stay. I drove for hours, the anger inside me bubbling up to a level I didn't think was possible. I wasn't sad anymore. Sadness had been replaced by something else, something raw, consuming, and unforgiving. Every mile I drove, every second that passed, I thought about everything Anna had done, every lie she'd told, every moment she'd stolen from me. And then there was Mark, the man she'd chosen over me, the man she'd built this betrayal with. They both thought they could just move on, that I'd be left in the wreckage while they played happy family. No, that wasn't going to happen. By the time I checked into a dingy motel on the outskirts of town, a plan was forming in my head. It wasn't clear yet, but it was there, simmering, waiting to be shaped. I needed to take control of the situation. I needed to make them feel what I felt. No, worse than what I felt. They needed to understand what it was like to lose everything, to watch your world crumble and know you were powerless to stop it. The first step was to gather information. Revenge isn't something you rush into. It has to be precise, calculated, devastating. I started with Mark. A quick search on social media revealed more about him than I could have imagined. He was cocky, arrogant, the kind of guy who flaunted his life like it was a prize he'd earned. Pictures of him at fancy restaurants, driving his shiny new car, and, most sickeningly, a few hidden posts that Anna had liked. Posts of them together, their faces too close for comfort. But Mark had weaknesses. He worked at a high-end dealership downtown, where appearances were everything. His reputation was spotless, on the surface. A little digging revealed some cracks. A few disgruntled customers, whispers of shady deals, and rumors about his personal life that hinted at infidelity not just with Anna but with other women. It was exactly the kind of leverage I needed. Then there was Anna. She was trying to keep things together at home, sending me texts every few hours. Please come back. I'm sorry. We can fix this. I love you. I ignored every single one. Love? Love doesn't come with lies. Love doesn't destroy you from the inside out. Whatever she was feeling, it wasn't love. Not anymore. I started my plan with something small, something to let Mark and Anna know I wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. Late one night, I drove to the dealership where Mark worked. The cameras were easy to avoid, and with a simple crowbar, I took out the windows of his precious car. Not just any car, the one he flaunted online, the one he'd bragged about buying after a big sale. By the time I was done, the sleek, polished exterior was a mangled mess of shattered glass and deep scratches. I left a note on the dashboard, "Karma always finds you." The next morning, Mark posted a cryptic status online about vandalism and people needing to grow up. Anna liked the post. I laughed out loud when I saw it. They had no idea it was just the beginning. The next step was more direct. I hired a private investigator. I wanted dirt on Mark, the kind of dirt that couldn't just ruin his day but ruin his entire life. The investigator didn't disappoint. Within a week, I had a folder full of photos, emails, and phone records proving that Mark wasn't just cheating with Anna. He had a whole lineup of women he'd been stringing along. One of them was married, and her husband, as it turned out, was more than happy to provide a sworn affidavit about Mark's involvement. I didn't go public with the information right away. That wasn't the point. The point was to make Mark squirm, to let him feel the walls closing in. I sent him an anonymous email with a few choice photos and a simple message. You think you're untouchable. You're not. Mark panicked. Within hours, Anna was calling me, frantic. Mike, did you do something? She asked, her voice shaking. Mark's been getting these weird messages. He thinks someone's out to get him. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to ruin someone else's life, I said, hanging up before she could respond. But the final act of revenge wasn't against Mark. It was against Anna. She needed to understand what it felt like to watch your life fall apart piece by piece. And for that, I needed help. I reconnected with an old friend, Jessica. She'd been my confidant back in college, someone who'd always had my back. We hadn't talked much since I got married, but when I told her what had happened, she was furious on my behalf. You don't deserve this, she said. Tell me how I can help. Jessica wasn't just supportive. She was stunning. And when she walked into the same cafe where Anna and Mark had been meeting, heads turned, including Anna's. I made sure Anna was there, sitting by herself at a table, when Jessica and I walked in, laughing and holding hands. The look on Anna's face was priceless. Shock, anger, and, most satisfying of all, hurt. But it didn't end there. That evening, I invited Jessica over to the house. Anna was still living there, refusing to leave despite my insistence. When she saw us together, she tried to confront me, shouting about how I was being cruel and vindictive. Cruel? I said, my voice calm but cutting. Cruel is lying to someone who loves you. Cruel is building a life with someone else while pretending to care. You don't get to call me cruel, Anna. Not anymore. Jessica stayed that night. We didn't sleep together. That wasn't the point. The point was to let Anna know that I was done being the victim. By the time I was finished, Mark's life was in shambles. His dealership fired him after a scandal broke about his affairs with clients' wives. Anna was left alone, trying to juggle her guilt, her lies, and the fallout of everything she'd done. And me? For the first time in months, I felt free. Revenge didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something I desperately needed: closure. I'd been broken, betrayed, and humiliated. But now, I was the one in control, and it felt damn good. For the first time in months, I woke up feeling lighter. The weight that had been suffocating me was gone. Anna was still in the house, but it didn't bother me anymore. Her presence felt insignificant, like the distant hum of a fan you forget is there. She tried to talk to me a few times, tried to apologize, tried to reason, but I had nothing left to say. I had said my piece, delivered my revenge, and now I was ready to move on. Anna, on the other hand, was a mess. She looked tired all the time, her once perfect appearance now unkempt and disheveled. She barely left the house, spending most of her days pacing, staring at her phone, or crying quietly in the bedroom. I thought I would feel satisfaction watching her fall apart, but instead, I felt nothing. She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. One evening, about a week after everything with Mark had imploded, Anna finally broke. She came into the living room while I was watching TV, her face pale and her hands trembling. "I can't do this anymore, Mike," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right." I muted the TV and looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "I made a mistake," she said, tears streaming down her face. "A terrible, unforgivable mistake. I thought Mark was giving me something I was missing, but I was wrong. He's gone now. He won't even talk to me. And I don't blame him. I ruined everything. I ruined us." She dropped to her knees, sobbing into her hands. "Please, Mike, please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. I can't do this alone." Her words hung in the air, heavy and desperate. For a moment, I felt a pang of something, sympathy, maybe, or pity, but it was fleeting. "I already forgave you, Anna," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going to forget. And it doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. Too much has happened. Too much has been broken." She looked up at me, her face etched with despair. "So, what does that mean? What happens now?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "It means you need to figure out what you want for your life, Anna. Without me, I'm done. This marriage is over." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I had given her everything: my trust, my love, my loyalty, and she had thrown it all away. There was no coming back from that. The next few days were a blur of packing and logistics. I made it clear to Anna that she needed to move out, and surprisingly, she didn't fight me on it. She found a small apartment on the other side of town and left quietly one morning, taking only her clothes and a few personal items. As she stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, she turned to me one last time. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. And then she was gone. After Anna left, the house felt empty, but it wasn't the kind of emptiness that weighed you down. It was the kind that gave you space to breathe, to think, to rebuild. I started putting myself back together piece by piece. I threw myself into work, spent time with friends I had neglected during the chaos, and even started seeing a therapist to process everything I had been through. It wasn't easy. There were days when the memories would creep back in, uninvited and painful. I would think about the good times with Anna, the life we had built together, and wonder how it had all gone so wrong. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as time went on. One afternoon, I got a call from Jessica. She had been a rock for me during the aftermath, offering support without judgment. We'd grown closer over the weeks, and her call felt like a lifeline. "Hey," she said, her voice warm. "You free for coffee?" I hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Yeah, I think I am." We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where the noise of the world seemed to fade away. As we talked, I realized how much I enjoyed her company. She didn't ask about Anna or Mark or anything that had happened. She just asked about me, how I was feeling, what I was planning for the future. It was refreshing, like stepping into the sunlight after months in the dark. A few weeks later, I filed for divorce. It was a clean break. No messy legal battles or drawn-out arguments. Anna didn't contest it. She seemed to understand that this was the only way forward for both of us. When the papers were finalized, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. It was as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. Life didn't go back to normal after that. It found a new normal. I learned to prioritize myself, to set boundaries, to recognize my own worth. And as the months went by, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my now empty home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, and, ultimately, the healing. It had been a journey I never wanted to take, but one that had taught me more about myself than I could have ever imagined. Sometimes, life has a way of breaking you, so you can rebuild yourself stronger. And while I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, I was grateful for the clarity it had brought me. For the first time in a long time, I was truly free. The months that followed were transformative. I poured myself into things I had neglected: my hobbies, my career, my friends. Jessica and I grew closer, and while I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, I appreciated her presence in my life. She reminded me what it felt like to be cared for, genuinely and selflessly. I wasn't looking for redemption through someone else. I was finding it within myself. Then, one quiet evening, I got a message. It was late, and I had just settled into bed when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached over, assuming it was a work email or a random notification, but the name on the screen stopped me cold. It was Anna. The message was short and simple. "Can we meet? It's important." I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete the message and never look back. But curiosity has a way of sneaking in when you least expect it. Against my better judgment, I replied, "What's this about?" Her response came quickly: "I'd rather explain in person." "Please, Mike. Just one conversation." I agreed to meet her at a neutral place, a small diner we used to visit during our early years together. It felt like a safe choice, somewhere public, somewhere with no emotional weight attached to it anymore. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a booth near the window. She looked different, not just physically, though the toll of the past few months was evident in her tired eyes and slouched posture, but there was something else, a quietness about her, as though she had finally realized the gravity of what she had done. I sat down across from her without saying a word. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence stretching between us like an invisible barrier. "Thank you for coming," she said finally, her voice soft. "What do you want, Anna?" I asked, keeping my tone even. I wasn't here for small talk or apologies. I wanted answers. She took a deep breath, fiddling with the edge of a napkin. "I know I don't deserve your time, but there's something you need to know. Something I didn't tell you before." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I'm listening." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the table before meeting mine. "It's about the baby," she said. My heart clenched at the mention of it, but I didn't say anything. She continued. "After you left, I went to Mark. I told him about the baby. I thought he'd want to be involved." Her voice broke, and she wiped at her eyes before continuing. "But he didn't. He didn't even care. He told me he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. He said I should have thought about that before I got myself into this mess." I clenched my jaw, the anger I thought I had let go of bubbling back to the surface. I didn't interrupt, though. I let her finish. "At first, I was devastated," she said. "But then I started thinking, and I realized the baby might not be his." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What are you saying, Anna?" I asked, my voice low and steady, masking the storm brewing inside me. "I'm saying there's a chance the baby is yours," she said, looking at me with a mixture of hope and fear. I didn't want to believe it at first. It seemed impossible. But the timing, it lines up. I sat there, stunned. Every emotion I had buried came rushing back, overwhelming and relentless. Anger, confusion, betrayal, and, beneath it all, a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe? I hated that it was there, but it was. I know I have no right to ask this, she continued, her voice trembling. But if the baby is yours, I want you to be part of its life. I want you to have the chance to be a father. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to process what she had just said. The baby might be mine? How was I supposed to respond to that? After everything we'd been through, everything she had done, how could I even consider trusting her again? I need proof, I said finally, my voice cold. I'm not going to take your word for it, Anna. If there's even a chance that baby is mine, I need to know for sure. She nodded quickly. Of course. I've already scheduled a paternity test. I wanted to tell you before the results came back. I thought you deserved to know. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. Let me know when you have the results, I said, turning to leave. Mike, she called after me. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't respond. I just walked out of the diner, the weight of her words pressing down on me. The next few days were a blur of restless nights and unanswered questions. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility, as much as I wanted to push it away. When Anna called to tell me the results were in, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The test confirmed it. The baby was mine. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger or bitterness, but a strange, overwhelming sense of responsibility. This child, this innocent life, wasn't to blame for any of the pain and betrayal. It didn't ask to be brought into this mess, and it didn't deserve to pay for our mistakes. I agreed to be involved, but I made it clear that my involvement was for the child, not for Anna. We worked out arrangements for co-parenting, and while it wasn't easy, it was manageable. I stayed firm in my boundaries, refusing to let Anna back into my life beyond what was necessary for the baby's well-being. Looking back, I realized that life rarely unfolds the way we expect. It's messy, unpredictable, and often painful. But it's also full of opportunities to grow, to learn, and to redefine ourselves. The betrayal I experienced had broken me, but it also rebuilt me into someone stronger, someone who knew his worth. And as I held my child for the first time, I knew that, despite everything, this was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I would write the story, one choice at a time. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild Love Story for more incredible tales of love, betrayal, and revenge.